Hello and happy Tuesday. I'm so glad to see you. I'm Dr. Robin Gould. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad we get to have this hour together that we have every week in these afternoons, wherever you are in the world. It might not be afternoon for you, but it is 2 o'clock Eastern time for me here in Florida. And so we're having a bit of a chilly day. I hope you're having a cozy, whatever great day wherever you are. And wherever you've been, whatever you've done, whatever you've thought, whatever you're struggling with, whatever you're celebrating, I want you to remember that the future begins now. And so we're going to get right into what we're talking about because it just feels like that hour goes by so fast and we never get to cover everything I want to cover. But this is part two of the of last week. So that would be January the 21st? No, 26th maybe? Yeah, I think it was the 26th. It's called Camels and Gnats. And so I want to do part two. I didn't even get to quite even get into the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament writing that I want to talk about, which we're actually going to go on to the next one because time does march on and everything is so relevant now, week for week with the portion of really what's happening. It's amazing. It's amazing when you know the portions. When the Bible is your foundation, it's exciting. You start seeing things and you have a lot of hope. And so the future begins now is really nothing to say we erase everything good you've done. We're saying we're heading toward a future of even better, more growth, more expansion of who we are, and more opportunity. So I just want you to know this. That's always supposed to really encourage you. So let's get into what we're talking about. The portion. We're going to do some of the portion. So last week we talked about camels and gnats, and oh my gosh, I like the heat is on. It's actually a little chilly here, and all my little hairs are flying over. It's going to itch me. Okay, we're going to pretend that isn't happening. Okay, so camels and gnats. So what we were talking about last week was the idea that there were a lot of people in the political world that were very much removing themselves from the political world, or they were making judgments overtly in the political world. So we're talking about the political world, and I would call that on some level government systems that oppress people would be, from my perspective, the beast, right? That beast system that is not really that's not the ideal, right? And so we were talking about offenses last week. We were talking about people that get offended over something that's maybe one individual leader would say that would offend them because they didn't like the way they said it, or they thought their personality wasn't eloquent. And they would elevate that preference. Maybe it was something that was said about women they didn't like. Maybe it was something they said about someone else or whatever they didn't like. And they were elevating their offense toward these things very specifically above the laws and the governing and the important things. So basically, it would say that you are swallowing a camel and straining the gnats, right? You're just your priorities are off. Your priorities really shouldn't be caring about that politician's life. It should be caring about yours, your children, and your grandchildren. These are the things that should be our priorities. This would be what I would call the outside of the cup. It might look clean, but it's the inside of the cup. Right? A tweet might be the outside of the cup and there might be a certain thing, and you might even call that fruit. I'm not saying I can judge everything that's fruit. What I can say is that the inside of the cup is what's coming out of the cup in terms of something lasting that impacts other people as a matter of principle and not just as a matter of preference. Okay, so that's a really important thing that we need to rise above out of our piety and our religiousness, and we need to get into some sort of politics. Now, I am one of the Becky Book authors. I write books. One of the authors, this example, Divorce and Remarriage in the Bible. I've got some other books, and they're simple books to help you understand some of these more topics that people often don't do a big deep dive in. I do the dietary laws from an attachment perspective. That's not something you see every day, but I'm an attachment specialist and I'm very motivated and the lens through which I see everything is through attachment. It's very important you understand that about me. Always know to whom you listen and what their bias is, because of course that just gives you their slant. I'm always going to look at God the Father as a good parent. I'm always going to see his laws as good. And in the portion this week, we get the law. I'm not going to cover that particularly. I'm going to give you context for the whole thing of it. But I want to just say some stuff about politics, specifically in terms of principle. So I know there are some people, and I see it like on Facebook or whatever, and I understand that people can get politics fatigue. And I have had it, and I kind of have it. And it's nothing wrong with that. Like people, there's just a lot going on. To what extent can we do things, right? We can pray, yeah, and we can email our representatives, and we can educate people about things that are really the weightier matter, the camels and not the gnats, and try to make a difference. If people don't have ears to hear, you cannot glue ears on their head and make them hear. So that's frustrating, but that is a truth, and we need to understand that. But politics matters in a lot of ways for the believer, right? Very particularly for the believer. So some people, just kind of get, and I'm not saying this is you. I'm saying I've seen just this whole piety of like, I'm so above politics. I've let that go. I'm really just about God. Let me tell you something. God is about politics. And I want to talk about it, and I want to connect it to the portion. And there are people with whom I communicate that do agree with me. And we've had some really great discussions. But politics matter very much. It's very important. And a lot of people think only religious system matters, which is not true, because religious systems are impacted by politics. So the word politics means affairs of the city, affairs of the cities. So in Greek, that's where that word comes from. Well, you have more of what in the cities than in the countries? In the country, in the rural areas, you have more what? People. What does God love the most? The people. So how cities, the affairs of the cities and how things are run where a lot of people are, God loves those people. And I think a lot of people in religious systems start thinking, well, if you're going to choose to live in a gross city, that's on you. Well, yeah, I mean, we could all choose to go out and live in the middle of nowhere and feel very holy because of it. Or we could feel like, maybe we need to be in the cities where all the people are that God loves. Maybe we need to be a voice crying out in the wilderness, and that might be the wilderness, right? The wilderness is, a place where he speaks. Has he ever spoke to you in a city? He's spoken to me in a city. So, don't really kind of get into this whole conformist idea that if you're not in the middle of nowhere, you're just not very holy. You're not set apart. Let me tell you something. You are set apart when you set yourself apart for holy use. Okay, so that's really, really, really important that we understand that. So we have laws, especially for cities. Why do we have the law? Because we have cities. Now, the laws apply to all people, all times, all generations, and forever. And you will always hear that from me. I'm a Torah now, Torah forever girl, grace now, grace forever girl. I am that whole thing. We always had both. We always needed both. You always have humans. You always have God, grace, and we have law. And I never advocate breaking the law. I always advocate the weightier matter, for sure. We have to know what the weightier matter is, just like the midwives did. And we have to adjudicate our morality the best that we can. And that's all we can do, is the best that we can. But we can't turn a blind eye to all the people in the cities and the way governance happens, because people who are politically active in religious systems are impacting people, and people are things that are what God loves. So we can't turn a blind eye. And that's just a really important part. So don't think that that's like holiness, right? Okay. So as I call what I would call government a beast system, I don't think anybody would really disagree with me. I think that in some form or another, whether it be the thing or a thing, yes, for sure. But first, we do have to identify the beast. And what does the beast want to do? The beast would be slavery, right? This is a big deal. This is the portion that we've been dealing with, is slavery. What is Pesach? It's the telling of the deliverance of slavery. Very important thing. Even the Father in this portion says, I am the Lord your God who delivered you from the slavery of Egypt. Like he's defining himself as the one who delivered you from slavery. So do you think he thinks slavery is important? Yes, he absolutely thinks it's important, because it's part of how he identifies himself. These are bragging rights he gets because he is our deliverer. So I want to talk about a couple types of slavery. So as an attachment specialist, right? one of the biggest things I talk about is internal slavery. And we're gonna do meta slavery, right? So that would be like slaves on the inside and slaves on the outside. So the slave on the outside would be the straw man. This idea that we put straws and mud together and make uniform bricks because people tell us to, and we do it in the way they tell us, and we don't get to make choices about our lives. That's what the Israelites did. They didn't get to make choices. They didn't get to have decisions. They didn't get to do what they wanted to do. They didn't even remember the Torah anymore, because the Egyptians did a whole different religion, and they weren't even really allowed to. Maybe they did, and I'm sure on some level some did. But for sure, the straw man is that slave that the government owns, right? The governing body, that beast, owns them. It provided for them leeks and cucumbers. Remember that, when they were hemmed in and they're like, hey, were there no graves there? Why don't we just die there? Even it's better to just not die there and get out, right? So from a meta perspective, that's the straw man. That is unfair and wrong. People are not to own other people. People don't own you. You have sovereignty over yourself. You are given dominion over your own choices and your own life. And whenever a politician reminds you that God gave you those rights, we're like, thank you for the reminder, but you didn't give me those rights. The Creator gave me those rights to be the person I choose to be, as long as you're not hurting other people. Now, from a micro, more of an inward way, and you hear me talk about this all the time, is I'm very invested in teaching people about the false self. The false self would be the part of us, like Eve in the garden, where she was tricked and seduced into, and in her own mind wanted to be like God. And that's what she was presented. She was presented with the option, so she thought, of eating off the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which would make her the judge of what is good and what is evil. And that she could be like God and judge things. And being like God is not possible for humans who weren't made to be gods. We cannot judge things. Now, we can make decisions about things, and we can decide things that are right or wrong, but we cannot judge good and evil because we don't know a man's heart. Only the Father God, our Creator, knows men's and women's and people's and children's and everybody's hearts. It's very important that we know we don't have sovereignty over that judgment system. We are the people, and the judge is the judge. So we're either the receiver of the law and the doer of the law, or we're the giver of the law. There's no intermediate human in you that can sometimes be the judge and sometimes not. Okay? Remember that. That's very important. So that's where we're going into. That's why slavery is just this huge deal. It's just a really big deal. And it's a big part of the Messiah's ministry was to come against religious leaders that were trying to put burdens and yokes on the people in this ownership territorial way, not in a way that was providing a community to be close and harmonious and in step with each other and kind and helpful and grieving together and mourning together and rejoicing together and celebrating the feast together. No, they wanted to be leaders and rulers. And a good leader isn't so much making you love them as much as they're making you appreciate the way God made you. Though, of course, we can appreciate the leader for what they are. So if there's a leader that's caused people to rise up and recognize their worth, their value, and their freedom, that's a good leader. It just depends on what you think. If the leader is just somebody providing for your needs, that's part of a leader. But a true leader is going to empower, encourage, and respect you and dream for you, right? And be for you. So the false self and the strong man are two versions of slavery that I talk quite a bit about. But we're in Exodus 18 through 20, and and it ends on verse 23. We're not going to do that whole thing. I want to just get to a certain point, and I want to make a few points because I mean, we really never have time in an hour, right? This could take a year, right? Honestly, but I want to just touch a few things that maybe you're not getting from other places because I I always just try to be in my lane. Okay, and here's my lane, which is attachment. And so here is where we are going to talk a little bit more about Jethro. So this is Yitro. This is what our portion is. So if we are in chapter 18, starting in verse 1, Jethro, who's the priest of Midian, remember this was Moses married his daughter, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, how the Lord brought Israel out of Egypt. Okay. We are already introduced to, again, how important this story of deliverance was, is, will be. So when he heard of all of this, it said that he heard of all of this. Like, this was a story, big story, huge story. The second Exodus will be bigger, if we can imagine. So yes, slavery is a big, huge issue. And the father is extremely, as he should be, proud of himself. And I say this in a reverent way because he should be, because he is our deliverer, takes us out of slavery, delivers you from all slavery, delivers me from all slavery. Nothing can enslave you. Nothing can entrap you unless you open the door to let that happen and give consent. So let's talk more about this. What does consent look like? We're going to talk about that. So when he heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel and his people, how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. Now Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, had taken Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her home, along with her 2 sons. Okay, so he'd sent her home. A lot of people have a lot of problem with all that because they're like, is that the right thing to do? Well, he did it. Are you the judge? Are you, Hava, trying to be like God and making a decision whether he should or shouldn't do that, if it was good or evil or whatever? You don't know. Probably was good. I don't know. I'm not the judge either. But the father-in-law shows up with her 2 sons. Now, one of the sons was named Gershom, for he had said, I have been a sojourner in a foreign land. Okay, remember Moshe escaped Egypt the first time because he had killed the Egyptian that was hurting the Hebrew? And then the 2 Hebrews were fighting and he approached them and they were against each other and against him. A little familiar. And so he gets caught and he flees, right? And this is where he meets his wife. And he names his first son. I have been a sojourner in a foreign land. The son is the fruit of that experience. He's one of the things that came from that experience. And the name of the other, Eleazar, for he said, the God of my father was my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. Pharaoh is a massive theme in the Bible. Pharaoh, Pharaoh, Pharaoh. Pharaoh is in the form of a lot of tyranny. Depends on how you say that. I hear different teachers using it in different ways, so I'm going to cover my bases. Interesting. He named his 2 children after I was a sojourner in a foreign land, and the name of the other, Eleazar, the God of my father is my help. He delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. So Moshe was delivered a couple ways. One, he fled. The other, God fled him. He was delivered in 2 ways. One was his doing, excellent. The other was God's doing, excellent, right? And here we have this story. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife to Moshe in the wilderness where he was encamped at the mountain of God. And when he sent word to Moshe, I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and 2 sons with her. Moshe went out to meet his father-in-law and bowed down and kissed him. And they asked each other of their welfare and went into the tent. So that's interesting. They asked each other of their welfare and then they went into the tent. So the Bible, to me, not a wordy book. When it goes out of its way to say there was a greeting, there was an exchange, how are you? That to me is setting the tone for that this relationship, they missed each other. They couldn't wait to talk and give each other the 411, like what's been happening. And it says that they asked each other. Moshe also wanted to know, how are you? And so then they went into the tent, and then Moshe told his father-in-law. So the very first thing they did was, so how are you? Before the story came, it's like, how are you? What's up with you? Then Moshe tells his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardship that had come upon them in the way, and how the Lord had delivered them. And Jethro rejoiced for all the good that the Lord had done to Israel, in that he had delivered them out of the hand of the Egyptians. Jethro in Midian was like another religion, right? This is not what you would expect, but isn't it? With this beautiful, amazing story, what does that tell you? It tells you that people are drawn to deliverance. People are drawn to being rescued from the oppressive, crushing hand of tyranny, right? It's we need to be rescued. We want to be rescued. If anybody ever tells you that your love or relationship with God was based on a rocky foundation, if you were only seeking for help and it wasn't just out of like humility, disagree with that silently if you have to. But if you are reaching out and crying out for the Lord to deliver you, that is humility. You're already admitting you can't do it. You're already admitting he can, or at least hoping. Please remember that. Let's let one of those judgments like be gone, right? Because he had delivered them out of the hand of the Egyptians, that oppressive hand. So you keep getting this redundant sentence, like we know, we get that. But the Father isn't letting you forget it. He keeps redirecting your attention that it is not good to be under the hand of Pharaoh. It's not the way you were designed. So Jethro said, "Blessed be the Lord." This guy from another religion says, "Blessed be the Lord who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians." Again, you're getting this sentence, okay? And out of the hand of Pharaoh. So what was happening was the Egyptians and Pharaoh had a heavy hand on the Israelites and the mixed multitude that, I don't know to what extent the mixed multitude included, like what that was. A lot of people have a lot of themes and views on that. I'm not even getting into it. But to deliver you out of the hand of the Egyptians and the hand of Pharaoh. So Egyptians would be the people that belong to Pharaoh by lineage or association of some kind. They themselves had participated in Pharaoh's enslavement of these people. When you look at, maybe Hollywood or other dominant systems that are vocal and in this public eye, and they're against freedom for you, they're against you having the 10 Commandments in your courts, they're against you being able to worship or whatever, right? Like that's a big deal. These people were just as much a part of the problem as Pharaoh. And they're mentioned in the same sentence, that God not only delivered them from Pharaoh, but from those Egyptians that agreed with Pharaoh, sided with Pharaoh, had the same agenda as Pharaoh. Okay. He says, now I know, because of that, now I know, now that I've heard this story of deliverance, now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods. Because in this affair, they dealt arrogantly with the people. So now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, because in this affair, they dealt arrogantly with the people. So it was arrogant. We can keep you. You're ours. You think you can go? You think you can leave? Even when we tell you to leave, we're going to change our mind and come back and get what is ours. Well, remember in the garden when Adam and Chava are hiding and the Father comes in the cool of the day? Actually, that word is he storms in the spirit to take back what was his. Right? There's always a counterfeit to what God is on earth, this earthly temporal counterfeit system, always trying to replace God. From the very, very beginning, hey, you could replace God as judge. He just doesn't want you to be like him. But you could be. And she's like, oh, I want to be. And her husband, who's with her, who heard the whole thing, he did too. Okay. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, again, they keep referring to him as his father-in-law. Keep redirecting. Think of the stereotypes we have of fathers and daughters, right? It's always kind of a joke. Like the father has daughters and she's going to go out on a date and he's got like his shotgun in the corner. Make sure the guy not right. This is the father of the woman that he married and was apart from for quite some time. Okay. And so Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, what did he do? When he heard about this deliverance, and he knew that this was the most powerful God, because all of the plagues that they endured and went through, they all focused on one of the Egyptian gods and overtook it. Each plague dominated the fake little g gods that the Egyptians worshipped and delivered the people. God delivered the people. And so Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and sacrifices to God. And Aaron came, right, who's the head of the Levites. He came with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. If that's not your stamp of approval that this was a holy thing. The deliverance from slavery witnessed to this father-in-law of another faith, of another religion, of another belief, who had only just heard the story. He himself was way out in the non-city, Midian, but he hears the story of this politics, the affairs of the cities, and how they got out and were delivered. And what did he do? He worshiped. And who honored it? The Levitical priesthood, the Kohanim, Aaron, right? Do you even understand? I think that is so exciting because now you're seeing some things happen. The Israelites had to wake up and get that they were slaves. But remember when the two Hebrews were at each other's throats? And then when Moshe tries to help the incorrect one comes against Moshe. And he flees and he gets himself prepared. He gets away, he gets a wife, he bears fruit, names these kids, these two important facets of deliverance, right? I'm a stranger and I get saved. It's really exciting and interesting how Moshe had to step away for a bit to come back and walk into his destiny. He was born for this. He was equipped for this. He was raised in Pharaoh's house to do this. But this other guy, Jethro, and him, they meet before they go in the tent, and they're palling around. Moshe loves people. He's a rescuer of people. He cared about Jethro before he told them the big story. And Jethro listened to the story, was moved, and brought his faith to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's amazing. Don't miss whenever there's redundancy in the words. Don't miss it. Don't miss what you're supposed to be told. So now, that talks about the straw man. Moshe delivered the straw man. And as they sat and waited for these plagues to go through, can you imagine how it might have felt? They had darkness, but not the Israelites. All these things didn't happen to the Israelites. They watched it, though, as they just kind of went down bad spiral after bad spiral. as God showed his dominance over all these other gods. If we trust in other gods, we will be let down. We are not safe. The father, remember Solomon? Who's the real mother? I'm not letting everything get cut in half because I'm the real mom. And Solomon had the wisdom to see that. But the people had to wake up to see what slavery really was, what it had really taken from them. And as each plague happened, they saw, I thought the lice god was like a big deal. Not really. Not really a big deal. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob smoked that God. Like it's little g God, done. It's kind of exciting. They were able to see all that. One thing after another that the Egyptians counted on that gave them their identity as these, polytheistic, like the Pharaoh being that main deity and that death of the firstborn, right? They got to see all of these things just come crumbling down. All the systems in place that these 10 false gods kind of had a chokehold of the people. Think about the things that we have in our lives that we just feel like it's kind of got a hold on me. No, I can't do without that, or I'm not challenging it. Like maybe I'll do without it, but I'm not challenging it. Well, what does God do? Challenges it and wins. And it took a while because each time they thought, this time I'm free, this will do it. My friends, ownership of other people doesn't leave easily. If you're married and you have a controlling partner, it is hard for them to let that go. As a marriage therapist, I will tell you, seek compassionate help for that person to be able to let go so that they can let go truly. Now, the Father God, he had compassion because he gave them all those chances to see how powerful he was and where safety could be on the other side of the situation. Because anyone with the blood on their doorstep was free. The mixed multitude went with them. He who has ears to hear. Okay, we're more than halfway done, so I guess I have to get to the next part. But the Brit Hadashah, this New Testament reading for this week, it's about that rich man. So we're in Matthew 19, 16 through 26. I'll read these 10 verses and we'll get into this. Okay, ready? And behold, okay, and look, get ready. This is important. A man came up to him saying, Teacher, what good deed must I do to have eternal life? And he said to him, Why do you ask me about what is good? There is only one who is good. If you would enter life, keep the commandments. So that I would love to spend an hour unpacking that in a controversial way, but we don't have time, but we will someday. You get the word good there. Who is the only one that knows good or evil? Not. Okay. He's like, why are you asking me? Human. Right? There's only one who is good. Now our actions, only God knows if they're good or evil. But he made people very good. Anyway, that's another discussion for another time. If you would enter life, keep the commandments. He who obeys the commandments will live by them. Remember in Leviticus, it says that. Like, yeah, you do this, you're not going to die. This is how to live and how to live safely and well, right? And in harmony with God and your fellow man. And he says to him, which ones? Now here's Yeshua. He says, you shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. Honor your father and mother and love your neighbor as yourself. So he just gives him a few. Which ones? Okay, now there's a lot of ways that people read this. Some people think those are the only laws, period, that Yeshua says to keep. That's it. Well, that leaves out a really lot. Like you can drink blood now, right? That's just an example. Think of all of the laws not listed here that would be egregiously horrific if we broke them. Now remember, it's already sealed and galvanized in our heart as truth, Deuteronomy, everything that was given. And in this Torah portion, the law is given to Moshe again, for the first time written down. We believe it. It's true. Our God is not a man that he would lie. So the young man says to him, well, I've done all that stuff. Like, I haven't stolen. I haven't borne false witness. I have honored my father and mother. I've loved my neighbor as myself. So interesting. Maybe he's mentioning the things that the guy has already obeyed. Very specifically, he's not murdered anybody. He had never committed adultery. He had never stolen anything. He had never been borne false witness against somebody else. He honored his parents. He loved his neighbor as himself. Maybe those are things he already did. Yeshua would be knowing of these things. And the young man says, all these I have kept. What do I still lack? Now that would, to me, and I don't know everything, but that would be so Yeshua to do that, to know all of his strengths and say, yeah, do those things. Well, I've done that. But there's a reason he's asking him. There's something unsettled there, or he wouldn't ask. That's my opinion. The young man says to him, all these I have kept. What do I still lack? And Yeshua says to him, if you would be perfect, so blemish free, go, sell what you possess, give it to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come follow me. Okay, now I just want to say something. Many people use this particular commandment to this particular person from Yeshua to live in communes with no belongings, right? Like, give everything away, take your children out of school, go and like live with nothing. And okay. That is not, I believe, at all what that means. But he's specifically addressing, what do I still lack, he says. So he tells him what he told him. When the young man hears this, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. So Yeshua knew this. He was a good guy. He was doing good things. He was upright and righteous. The outside of the cup was doing well, and a lot of the inside too. But he was very sorrowful when he went away because he had great possessions. Now, if you're in the presence of the Messiah and you know of miracles and you're like, what do I do? He's like, yeah, come follow me, but you walk away sorrowful for your possessions. Now, I'm just going to say, in the presence of this amazing, incredible, beautiful, one and only Messiah, like, what? Follow me? No, I don't. My couch, I love it. My sofas and my dates and my figs, whatever, But he had a lot of possessions. So Yeshua knew that this guy, personally, was operating in a false self. The rich guy, that's a false self. I have to tell everybody I have a lot of money, because then you'll know I'm worth something. I've done something good. I have value. You can like me. When the Father said, you're good because I made you good. You can't earn it. You can't detract from it. Your hands can't get on it. You have no access to your value. But if you think that money gives you value, ouch, that hurts. That's slavery. Then you are a slave to your possessions to stay valuable, working hard to upkeep them, rather than letting the Father upkeep you. So you have the straw man on the outside and the straw man on the inside, right? That's the false self. That's the inside of the cup that's not clean. Now, what does Yeshua say? Go get rid of your stuff and come be with me. I think what he's saying is your identity is in me, and I'm going to show that to you, and you're finally going to be happy because that stuff owns you. Not everybody who has a lot of money and a lot of stuff is owned by their stuff. But this guy knew there was something wrong with his life. So he, with all the crowds of people and all this stuff, somehow figured out a way and made it a point, and Yeshua allowed it, to approach him and say, teacher, what do I need? What should I do to have life eternal? Real life, the life that never leaves me. And Yeshua says to his disciples, so he walks away sad. And then Yeshua says, okay, I need to tell my group here. What do they need to know about this interaction they just witnessed? And he says to his disciples, truly I say to you, only with difficulty will a rich man enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, does he say that no rich men enter the kingdom? For sure not. But is it more hard? Yeah, he says it's going to be harder. Again, I tell you, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. Now, this, you might have read many, many commentaries on this, right? I've read many. I've talked to different people. I've heard different versions. Some people believe there was a gate that it was like a wrought iron gate at the gates of the city, Jerusalem, and that there was a smaller gate within it that you would be able to open at night to get through. But if your camel was loaded down on the sides with all your possessions, it was harder to get through. So you'd have to take each thing off and individually take each thing in. And that would be the eye. It was called the eye of the needle. And then there are people that say there's no evidence anywhere archaeologically. There's nothing really with any proof that that's actually true. Great story. It really helps us understand the narrative. But if it's not true, it doesn't help us understand anything. And then there are people that claim it is true. So you decide, do your research on that, and you see. Makes sense. I mean, I'm not saying it's not a great story. If someone can't prove it, I'd love to know where it came from. But I don't know. I have read different accounts of that too. And since I don't know, I'm not going to put a dog in that fight. Some people think that the word for, is a word for camel, it's a word for rope. That it's easier for a rope to go through an eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. And that would be really hard to do because a rope is really thick and a needle is really tiny. But with God, all things are possible. God can make that rope fit through that needle. Well, that would suggest something. That either the needle got bigger or the rope got smaller by what God would do. That makes sense too. That works for the narrative. But either way, whether we're unloading packs or the rope is getting skinnier or the needle's getting bigger, something is changing. So then it says, when the disciples heard this, they were really surprised. It says, greatly astonished, saying, well, then who can be saved? Like, everyone has possessions, or most people. But Yeshua looked at them. So it says he looked at them. It didn't just say he said. He looked at them, very meaningful. He turns to them, right? He's focused. I'm going to tell you something you need to hear, he's saying. And he says, with man, this is impossible. But with God, all things are possible. So man cannot save himself. Yeshua saves us. Man cannot whittle himself down to be a small enough rope or on his own unpack his camel. The Father has to give you ears to hear what slavery you're in and beckon you and save you like in Egypt and deliver you out of it. You are not going to do this on your own. And if you've tried and can't, be glad, because then the more you think you can do on your own, the more you keep doing on your own. Now, do we take accountability for our lives? Yes, we do. Do we have sovereignty over our choices? Yes, which means we deal with our consequences. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is recognize something important and profound here that the Messiah is saying. He looks at them and he's like, listen, you're going to have to be transformed with whatever is in charge of you. God's got to be bigger than that thing. And he says, now with you, you're not going to be able to do this. And I came and I know that this ball of dirt is not easy. But with God, any part of your life, in you, out of you, whatever, can be transformed so that you walk in your destiny and you know that you know that you know. The one thing you know is that God loves you and that your value only comes through him. No matter how much you obey all the Torah, if he doesn't get credit for making you good, you have missed the reason to have a city with beautiful laws, because each person deserves respect and love because God made that person. God made these people. The affairs of the cities are important to God because people are in cities and people are loved by God. Don't lift yourself out of politics thinking it makes you holy when it's all about people. And in slavery, thinking that other people own you, even in small ways, in political ways or whatever. No one owns you. You are to be delivered from that. And you can't deliver yourself. You have got to wait, endure the plagues, sit there, look, wait, watch, because the Father will deliver and it will be romantic. In the end, this is a romantic story. When we tell this story every Pesach, we're dipping blood on a plate, we're doing all this, eating bitter herbs. We have our rituals and the way that we, as a group, have decided this is how we do the retelling with our Haggadah, right? We do this every year. And to me, it's interesting. It's like, I always see it as God the Father, like, let's talk about how that time I rescued you. How did you feel? How did I feel? What it looked like? What happened? Remember Pharaoh, crash, whatever, right? It's a beautiful story. Even though it's a savage, bizarre story. It's a really bizarre story. But there's a lot of features of today's portion, last week's portion, next week's portion, the week before, that really kind of fit in where I feel like we are right now. And if you follow these portions, you're seeing the inner workings of slavery, how it destroys you from the inside out. Because remember, the Israelites had status at first through Joseph, right? They had the best land. Incredible status and respect. But over time, when that Pharaoh that no longer appreciates Joseph rises up and places taskmasters over them, they give in until God sends a Moshe. And where does he send a Moshe? Through Pharaoh's own house. Moshe was taken from the reeds by Pharaoh's daughter. You wouldn't have expected that. You would never have expected that. You'd expect it like a John the Baptist kind of guy, not like a Pharaoh's spoiled son. Pharaoh was the deity. And Joseph, right, became Pharaoh's right-hand man. So the straw man, right, the slave man, right, that's a massive identity that we take on and think, like today, our governor, I'm in Florida, gave this beautiful press conference about big tech and all the censorship it's been doing. And he's like, no, you know what? Other states are going to do what other states are going to do. I wish they would do what I'm doing. But what I'm saying is stop censoring my people who just want information and to talk to each other freely. Because when you limit how much they know who they are, in that Torah portion, it's like, we're worried the Israelites are going to know how many there are of them. They outnumber us. Well, the Father wants you free. He wants you free to obey his law. The law is not bondage. It's freedom. You know what's bondage? The beast system that says to keep those laws, you're getting in trouble. You want to talk about loving your neighbor? You want to talk about the Bible? You want to talk about teaching the Torah? No. You are prevented from freedom to obey the laws. That's what the beast doesn't want, because it comes to kill, steal, and destroy that system. And it is politics, my friend, that many times this is executed. This isn't a spiritual idea. It's a physical reality. And it's very easy to lift ourselves out of, piously out of politics when other people are stuck in suffering and hurting and trafficked. We have to commit, not just for our own selves to get out of slavery. We have to commit to being against slavery of all kinds, in us, in others, and outside of others, and in groups and in systems, in schools, all of these things. We need freedom because we need sovereignty over our own choices so we can live in free will and have that uninterrupted, beautiful relationship with our Father that brings him delight. And then that joy of the Lord will be your strength. But when you walk toward freedom because you know he's going to catch you, he's joyful. He loves you. And he wants you free. And he wants you free to obey his law. He loves his law and he loves you. And he made his law for you. And politics is the affairs of the cities, and he cares about all these people in all the cities. Because he wants to restore all things, each thing, everything, to be restored back to its original state. What was your original state? Each and every human being will be restored back to that original state. Take that for what you will. We'll talk about that another time, I guess. Let me see if somebody's in the chat. I haven't done the chat. I've got a comment there. I'm at a time when very few people are around. I love that I learned the difference between right and wrong and good and evil. Oh, Barb, thank you. I'm so glad. That encourages me. I think that is a great way to understand how to love your neighbor as yourself too, right? Is to know you really just don't know your neighbor and like everything they go through. Because Barbara, we go to Israel when we go a bunch of times. We've gone together and we'll sit in the dining hall at Tamar and we'll talk about like all the things that go on behind the scenes of everyone's life that people don't know, and how important it is to just know we don't know. Now, being a therapist, I see the things that other people don't know, and it's always amazing the things that you can learn. But the Father knew you before you even knew yourself. He knew everything. And he knew everything that happened to you when you were a baby, and all the people who neglected you or took care of you or showered you with love. And then when you were older, somebody forgot about you, or whatever the case may be. He remembers, like he's always remembering. He doesn't forget you. He never leave you, and he'll never forsake you. So in our Torah portion today, Yitro, and to remember, right, who Jethro was. He came around because he heard the story of deliverance. And you know what? It was not easy, and it took time, and it was many, many false starts. And it came from the last person they would have expected would help them. Someone from Pharaoh's own house that developed a heart because he knew somewhere he had a destiny because he was pulled out of the water. Something happened we don't know about. And so does God raise a David and a man after God's own heart? And do we accuse people and treat them like we think we know everything on the inside of them? No, my friend, social media is no way to judge a man's heart. I don't care what fruit you think you see. You don't know. Being a person from the North and living in the South for 15 years, nothing taught me more about people being different culturally, but loving God the same level and it looking different. And people just really putting moral judgments on things that really aren't moral. Well, Yeshua was all about that. And he gave us very good lessons. So anyway, BEKY Becky books, Building and Encouraging the Kingdom of Yeshua. Go and look at those on Amazon. I've also got a interactional follow-up guide to the book. It's called Safe Conversations. Go check that out and get the book it springboard launched off from. And I've got a children's book called The Forgiveness Hearts, and newcovenantpath.com is how you can go and check out. I have some blogs and podcasts. But anyway, I've really enjoyed talking to you. I hope that you learned something about yourself today. The straw man, the false self, the outside slave, the inside slave, whatever it is, no matter what, nothing is impossible with God, and the future begins now. Bye.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.